Delighted to have you all with us for the third and final webinar in our L&D expert series. So this time we're going to be focusing on the importance of a well-defined and really well-aligned learning value proposition, and the numerous benefits that this can bring to you and your organisations. So we'll be diving into this very soon, but before we do, I just wanted to introduce you to other members of the panel with me here today. So delighted to be joined by Kathy, Head of Design, and Jam, MD for APAC, both colleagues from Fusion Consultancy. For those of you who don't know, Fusion's part of the Amberjack Group, albeit on the other side of the world. So both dialing in from Australia today, and huge thanks to you both for bringing your expertise, wealth of knowledge, and insight to this webinar. So what do we have in store for you today? I guess shortly I'm going to be handing over to Jam to start us off, but just wanted to outline what we'll be covering, and really, as always, the purpose is that you leave with at least one actionable takeaway. Really like you to be able to go back to your teams, reflect on, and hopefully start to implement some of what we talk about here today. And we're, of course, all available after the webinar for more detailed conversations. If you've got any pain points, specific issues around your programs or questions, please do keep in touch. And also use the chat function to post any questions, and we can come back to those at the end of the session. So today we're really going to explore three key themes focused on helping you ultimately supporting the success of the programme, the success that the early talent cohorts have on the programme, as well as driving that engagement and the buy-in of the business. And really, we're going to look at how to define a powerful learning value proposition that connects with today's early talent and can really align to your broader business goals. We're also going to look at, importantly, how to bring that learning value proposition to life, really critical when you're looking to sell your program to candidates and get that executive program sponsor, line manager buy-in. How are you really going to bring your LVP to life? And then the million-dollar question, the return on investment, how to measure what matters, learn how to track engagement, how to demonstrate ROI back to the business. So that's what really we're going to focus on today. And I'll pass over to Jam now to kick us off. Thanks, Jam.
Fantastic, Jenny, and good morning, everyone. It is great to be with you today. Kathy and I are really looking forward to this session, and hopefully there'll be lots of questions along the way too. But we thought the best place to start is actually starting to define your learning value proposition and what exactly is an LVP. And your learning value proposition is your promise and commitment to your program participants. It really is what articulates your organisation's long-term strategy for that development offering and that development program. What we want to do is actually have executive leadership buy-in. Okay, it must allow for future readiness and adaptability along that way too. It should be aligned to your employee value proposition and any of your wider business objectives. And it starts to set the tone for how your development program comes to life down the track, how you measure its success, and it is the structure that guides the tangible elements of your recruitment campaign and the overall graduate experience too. So there's a lot to it. And for those that don't have one, we also want to start to think about, well, where do you actually start with something like this? And we like to start with the end in mind, or something that I would like to describe or refer to as your nirvana. What is the ultimate outcome that you're looking to do, and what's the purpose behind your learning offering that you have? So why does your program exist? What do you want your graduates or your early talent to walk away with at the end of the program? But also, what makes someone successful in your organisation? So the answers to these questions start to inform your learning value proposition and, of course, your program objectives too. Now, as we start to build out what your nirvana is, what your end goal is, there's a couple of things that we also think you need to consider. And these are the main considerations when it comes to a learning value proposition. And we're going to deep dive into a number of these a lot more on the call today. But again, I think if you do have questions, put them in the chat there because we will get to those too. But let's look at a little closer at a number of these sort of considerations at play to be able to clearly define what your learning value proposition is. And over the next couple of slides, we'll break these down in greater detail for you. But let's start with number one, business goals. So understanding the needs of the business, aligning that to program strategy within the business strategy, and identifying your differentiators in the market. What makes you unique? What's your USP? And actually defining what success looks like. Your key objectives. So defining what your development objectives are and aligning these to any competency frameworks that you have in the business and designing specific success measures for each of those two. And then we want to be able to get to having an LVP statement, a learning value proposition statement, a combination of all of this thinking that becomes your development program strategy. This is what we're working towards here. And there's a number of different things here, Kath, that we need to be considering around all of this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, John. And hi, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, let's break down each of these pieces. So when it comes to business goals, this is a little bit of a linear approach to getting to the position of having an LVP. It's important from a business goals perspective to understand what the business needs, right? To gain executive support, you're looking for commitment of budget and resources to support the program. And when it comes to buy-in, you may have a program in full flight with strong established buy-in, but by the same token, you may also have some work to do in gaining or maintaining that buy-in. So it's really important there to be aligning to those business goals. Also important at this point to be aligning to what success measures you need, what success looks like, and to be able to communicate that to everybody. So we've got a couple of tips that we've put on the side here in terms of this business goals thinking. You definitely want to align your broader business strategic priorities. You want to show how the program is supporting those key business and talent priorities. So it might be innovation, it could be productivity, it could be talent retention. In terms of demonstrating ROI, we'll talk a lot more about this a little bit later as well, but providing evidence of how upskilling your employees is going to lead to those measurable business benefits. And maybe you're here looking at increased efficiency across the business or reduced turnover, maybe even customer satisfaction even. There's lots of different ways to look at that. You can use your talent development metrics to prove your learning's impact. That might be retention rates or engagement or performance improvements. And then as an example of all of that, if retention is a key priority for you, then what you're going to want to do is show how your employees who engage with the learning programs will in fact stay longer in your organisation. So that's what we're talking about demonstrating that ROI. It's important to speak their language, absolutely. So use metrics that will resonate with an executive and senior leaders. So you're going to need to talk revenue growth. You're going to need to talk cost savings, innovations, employee retention, whatever that is aligning to that strategy there. Communicating your point of difference is really important. So you might look at case studies or benchmark data from your competitors. And what you really want to do here is to frame learning as a competitive advantage, rather than just being a training cost. So that's really important to think through. Engaging with the full range of the stakeholders that are going to be part of this program. That will probably also include employee feedback. So if you're gathering feedback from the employees, that will also help you ensure that the training and the learning that you design within your program is actually going to meet some real tangible career needs and those development needs within the business. And then the final tip here on this book is around finding some program advocates. In all of your conversations, you're going to find some executives and leaders who stand out and you can use as champions of your program. So absolutely look to do that. So that's the first bit around business objectives. Now we start to look at what are those key objectives within the development program that you're needing to do. What capability do you need to build? What makes someone successful in your organisation? What skills do they need at the time of roll-off, which is what Jum referred to before as that nirvana. So you're going to align your development journey and those specific touch points to this end. So think about what competency frameworks that you have existing in the organisation. Is there anything specific in place for graduates or your early talent? And if not, this is probably the time to actually start to establish those and talk to your key business area leads to define something that's graduate specific there. You're then going to, importantly, define your success measures for each of those key objectives. And we'll talk a little bit later about those that idea of metrics and making sure that we're not choosing metrics for metrics' sake. We don't have data for data's sake, that we're actually aligning it back to these key objectives, which is important. So a couple of tips here. When we're looking at those objectives, try and identify any overlapping goals that you might have. So there might be some learning objectives that you have with your employee value proposition, your EVP, or potentially some talent strategies. And if your EVP is going to emphasize leadership pathways, as an example, your LVP should absolutely be starting to highlight some leadership training and mentoring. You want to be able to link your objectives to career growth as a really important factor of your LVP. So position learning as a key enabler of career progression. And then what you're wanting to do is actually be able to demonstrate or show how the employees can use the training to achieve that career growth, whether it's promotions or skill development or moving into leadership roles. And it's also choking. My apologies. It's also important to align the messaging and the branding that you have between your EVP and your LVP so that they're both communicating a consistent employee experience. You don't want your LVP to be standing out or doing something different there. So use similar language and themes across your talent attraction, across your onboarding and all of your different learning initiatives there. And again, as an example, if you're promoting innovation within your business, you want your LVP to promote things like continuous learning as a driver to that innovation. Final piece, this third piece, this is where everything sort of hits the ground and you create that LVP statement. It's going to bring together those development objectives. It's going to bring together those business needs, and it's essentially forming your development program strategy, right? So it's allowing you to take that strategy, gain buy-in from your stakeholders, and especially those people that are on the ground supporting the graduates and early talent. And what we want it to do is we want it to articulate the unique benefits and opportunities that your program is offering. So rather than looking at tips here, we're looking at just what are these foundations that we want to consider when we're building out our LVP statement. And importantly, what we're keen to advocate for you is to be focusing on the learner-centric benefits. What are those unique benefits? What's in it for your learner? So you can start to highlight whether it's skill enhancement, whether it's career growth, whether it's personal development, and any combination of those things. We talk about, we certainly mentioned it before, that you want to ensure relevance and applicability. So how does the learning connect to the real world? How does it connect to job performance? You want to be able to highlight the tangible changes or improvements that learners can expect after completing the program. And that idea of showcasing your differentiators is going to be an important component when it looks at when you start to look at attracting candidates to your program in the first place. So what makes this learning experience that you're promoting unique compared to other offers or things that they might be looking at? So let's start to bring this to life. How do we bring something like all of this thinking, this executive buy-in to life? What does it actually look like? How do we do that? So Jem, I'll pass back to you to take us through some of these ideas, I think.
Thanks, Kathy. I hope everyone's got their coffee in hand because there's a lot of information being thrown at you this morning. But exactly, how do we bring it to life? And what does it look like? And if we can start to promote what that development journey looks like through the use of even maps, a bit of a visual that showcases all those activities and touch points that align to your key development objectives, it's something that you can start to sell to candidates right from the get-go, right from that attraction phase, and start to really entice those candidates with what your offering is. So it does start to play a really big part to that. So no doubt a number of you, or all of you, have a lot of different development touch points as part of your program, and those inclusions that might be unique for you, but also what makes your program really, really good. So when we start to talk about journey mapping and what those inclusions are, some things to consider with that, and we'll show you some examples in a moment, but touch points that can occur after offer and prior to day one. Obviously, we all want to avoid those dreaded renegs. So these can build knowledge of the business they are going to be joining. They can start to build a support network, and it's that integral strategy in avoiding those renegs. Okay, so your program inclusions should include, those on-the-job trainings, perhaps the rotation opportunities, the development workshops that are along the way, any technical training, any lunch and learn events that they'll have access to. And then, of course, we've got to start to consider the support network that is part of the program. So maybe networking events, maybe a buddy program, mentor programs, guest speakers at workshops, maybe graduate panels, opportunities to meet and greet leaders across the business. Whatever it may look like, we should be starting to map out for them. So each element should link back to one of your key development objectives and the wider strategy here. So what could one look like? Now, here are some very simple ones that you could utilize during the attraction phase, okay? And how you bring all of this together. And the purpose is obviously to promote your development offering, your commitment to the program participants. And this is done at obviously those various stages through that process. So it can take on a different look and a different feel based on your objectives too. But during the attraction stage, when you're trying to cut through the noise and have a candidate consider applying for your program, a journey map like this would be a great way to start to position your brand to stand out and start to appeal to that next generation of professionals. We know they're keen to understand what the development offering is, what's in it for them, what they're going to get out of it, and this is a great way to start with that. But then we can also start to go a little bit deeper too. And during that, sharing that development journey right through that recruitment process, right through to that offer stage too, a journey map starts to provide more detail. It might start to look at possibly things with dates on it or specific topics, both pre and post start, that reaffirms your commitment to their development. It starts to get them really excited about the decision they've made to join your company, but also gives them a bit of insight into what is to come for them. So we've got a few examples here of what this could look like. And once they start, you can obviously start to then provide them out a much more detailed map showing all the individual elements of the program, the dates, the events against a timeline, even whether touch points are virtual or they'll be face-to-face. It's great to start to socialise this map with both them as early talent, but also your leaders as well, so they can really start to support the journey, make sure development's a priority, really start to embed some of those learnings along the way too. So as I said, these are a few examples of a number of different clients of different ways that they have visualized the journey. But I think we want to really deep dive into one specific client example and add a few more ideas into the mix around how you can start to bring this to life a little bit more. So Jenny, let's jump into a bit of a Belron example around how they were able to bring this to life.
Yeah, thanks, Jam. So yeah, as Jam said, getting a bit more insight into how you can really bring your development program to life for the early talent cohorts as they join. So this is an overview of the Belron development journey for their new cohort actually joining next month. As you might be able to see, it's pretty small on the screen. Appreciate that, but we'll share this deck with you all later. So this is the global program, so it spans the US, Australia, Europe, and the UK. And as you may be able to see, the structure of this program takes a themed approach to learning. And what we really mean by this is that each theme is focused around a particular area of development that's aligned to both the vision and the needs of the cohort at that point in the program. So that's really important when you're starting to design out your program, to continuously make sure that, as we've been saying, it's kind of aligned back with that learning value proposition and the business objectives for the overall program. So as with all our programs, the structure and design are anchored against the learning value proposition, and designed in a way that ensures a really cohesive and joined up approach. For those of you that joined the webinar that we had last week, we talked a lot about this and ensuring that as early talent cohorts, but also as business stakeholders, as key sponsors, it's really important to have a cohesive learning journey, and one that's really clearly understood by everyone that's involved and then aligns back to that vision. And the more you can showcase this, the more buy-in you'll get, both from the participants, so the learners, and also the program sponsors and everyone else that you're trying to engage in within and across the organization, because they'll then understand the point of it all and what you're trying to achieve and the impact that that's going to have on the broader business. So we found that bringing the program to life in this way can obviously help support numerous angles, but particularly bringing it to life for the graduates and then bringing it to life for the stakeholders, so that they're really engaged and understand the full journey that they're on. And like Jem said, they're not only understanding what part they're playing right now, but they can look ahead and see, this is what I'm going to learn in 6 months' time. This is what I'm going to learn in a year's time, in 2 years' time, so that if they're feeling slightly uneasy about a certain topic, or that they're lacking skills in a certain area, they know what's coming up ahead and they know that they're going to get that support. So that's one way that you can do it and really deep dive into that. So I'll pass back to Kathy now to focus on our final point, the all-important ROI.
Absolutely, the all-important ROI. We obviously have a key component of thinking about this. What does success look like when we're building out our LVP and aligning it to that wider business strategy? But the rubber's got to hit the road. We've actually got to unpack what that looks like. So ultimately, look, we can only know if our development program has been successful if we've actually identified what success looks like first. So we cannot forget that that's a really important component and a really important early conversation. And that's I guess, what we've been trying to talk through so far today. But if we start to look at some more specific measures that we might want to put in place, I've got a slide coming up with a whole heap of ideas. But initially, a successful program, just to get us understanding this, is more than just candidate application numbers. It's more than just diversity targets. And obviously we have a lot of those embedded in our programs because they're really important for the program and to be tracking that and reporting that back. But from a development program perspective, it can get a little bit more tricky. And so I'm interested in understanding what people are actually currently measuring. But if we do focus in and forget some of the attraction components here and just focus in terms of what we're talking about today with the development components of your program, it could look like in a number of different ways. We can look at participant engagement. So there's a number of different ways you can look at participant engagement being a success measure. You can look at competency growth. That might be formal or informal type of self-assessment measures. You can look at retention. That can be during program and post, which is great. Career progression is obviously a key component of most programs. We're looking for our early talent to be a pipeline of the future. So trying to find some success measures that fit alongside that. We can talk to a few ideas there on the next slide. And the other thing to really think about, which can be difficult to articulate, are things like innovation and business efficiencies. You can get some real buy-in and value if you're able to actually target and identify how to track those measures. So let's have a look at a whole heap of things on this next slide here. I won't talk to all of them, but we absolutely have some time for questions and we can chat about some specific measures that might suit your own program and your own LVP afterwards. But it's important here to track the right things. This is going to change based on your LVP and based on your program purpose. So all of you on the call with different programs are going to end up having a different approach to your ROI and those different success measures. So what you want to do, for example, I use the example of leadership, which is a very common output that we're looking for from our early talent. So if you're looking to build leadership capability, how are you going to measure it? And that needs to be defined. If your program is trying to support succession planning, what does that look like? So that's coming back to the strategy and making sure that all of our metrics are supporting either those development objectives or your wider strategy. So for each element of your LVP and those objectives, and also those key competencies that you're looking to grow, what we're asking is that you be really purposeful about what metrics you choose and how you're going to collect that data. So things you might want to consider, and I know you're reading a bunch of stuff on the slide, but just some high-level things, and then I'll go into a couple of examples here. You're probably going to want to look at both qualitative and quantitative measures, hard data, and then that anecdotal feedback and observations. They're both equally important and we can weight them accordingly, but both equally valuable to be considering there. You're probably also going to want some metrics that provide you immediate feedback. So what that does, if you've got some metrics there that give you immediate in the moment feedback, what that does, it allows you to pivot quickly. So whether that's pivoting activities or touch points or development or the support that your cohort might need, that's really important on the ground. And whether it's your leaders or other areas of the business that's supporting that, that's really important. But of course, those longer term metrics are also really important too. You want to be able to track your success over time. You want to be able to spot trends that are happening and to be able to adapt and be agile accordingly. And you probably also want to be able to compare the experience and the outcomes of different cohorts. So from year to year, what are those outcomes we're looking for and how do we want to pivot and what's working and what's not? So they're the sort of the fundamentals that we're looking for here. But amongst all of the ideas on the screen, I thought I'd shout out a couple that might be a little bit different in terms of your thinking already. We talked about observed engagement. How can you do this? There's basic things like attendance at events, their participation or engagement in particular content or activities, how a graduate or an early talent might proactively look to build their own development is a way of looking at their observed engagement in the program. You can look at one-on-one discussions that they might have with the leader and how are the individuals themselves taking ownership of those conversations. Are they actually leading those discussions or they're a passive part of your existing sort of performance and coaching conversations that your leader's having? So that looking at them leading that and taking ownership and taking charge of those conversations can be a really powerful engagement measure. You might look as well post-program. So we hope that the graduate and the early talent has had a great experience through the program and they're off in the world and doing some great stuff within the business. But do they have an interest in giving back to the program? And you might look at opportunities like buddying and mentoring that allows them to do that. So you can have some observed engagement through that measure as well. Company pulse checks is probably a standard in a lot of businesses, but interestingly, not all businesses have the ability to qualify the talent or qualify those results based on early talent. So there might be some measures that you consider there to build into those pulse checks so that you can actually look for those trends at that level. And then the last one on the screen there under participant engagement is organisational impact. We talked about innovation and efficiencies. So how can you start to look at the contributions to innovation within your business? How can you look at what process improvements have come about through that engagement from the graduates? What is that operational efficiencies that your early talent might have been able to contribute to? Competency groups feels fairly straightforward. I mean, we have a lot of performance metrics typically in place within a business, and we'll have hopefully a graduate-specific or early talent-specific competency framework that you're working towards. But what are some other areas that we can ensure that we're getting success here? Time to proficiency is a really interesting one. It's the final dot point that's in that square. You might link this to professional accreditation, depending on what industry you're in and what roles you're looking for. So whether that's engineering or accounting, there can be some professional accreditation that you're working towards there. So there might be a measure as how quickly they're able to actually achieve that. There's lots of different ways you can look at time to proficiency, but it's certainly nothing to forget about. Impact reports right in the middle of the screen there is a great one. You may not have come across this idea before, but we've got a couple of clients that use this really effectively in their pre-roll-off as a pre-roll-off activity. And what we get there is the participants actually nominating some leaders that they've worked with or colleagues that they've worked with and certainly worked closely with to get feedback on throughout the program. And then we seek feedback and stories from those nominees about specific instances where the graduate has or the early talent has actually made an impact in their team or with the wider business. And so that is a great thing for a participant at the end of their program to actually receive that feedback back from people that they've worked with. So that's a great a little initiative that a lot of our clients quite like. Moving across to retention and career progression, there's a lot here, so I hope you're writing lots of notes, but we're open to questions very, very shortly. The first one there is an interesting one. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but it's worth investigating whether your HRS has the ability to flag early talent. What that does, it can help you track retention rather than having a spreadsheet, which is what a lot of us typically do. It could potentially look at how you navigate understanding career progression for certain individuals or across a cohort. And you can also look at bounce back employees and actually knowing, hey, this person has left the organisation, but they've come back. So being able to flag that is an amazing ability. So it's certainly something to investigate. And leaders, we cannot forget our leaders. Our leaders play such a crucial role in the success of our programs, and no doubt that is a very big conversation that has been happening through some of these webinars so far. So think about their engagement, but maybe think about how you can track measures on your leaders. Can you build a formal KPI into their performance metrics, for example, or track their engagement in the program, their buy-in and their involvement in a lot of the initiatives you've got to be able to support the early talent? So lots more on the screen. I certainly don't want to bore you with all of them, but certainly happy to open up for questions on any of those that seem interesting to you to explore. One particular idea I thought I'd share with you, which is our APQ development assessment. This can be built into the recruitment phase to understand preferences from a development perspective, but we think this is a fantastic validated assessment, self-assessment, that can track those preferences at the graduate development or early talent development stage, so not just in recruitment. So this tracks preferences across our Amberjack Future Potential pillars, which you can ask us about if you're not familiar. It's a great data entry point for graduates navigating their own journey, being able to understand, because they get a report off the back of this assessment that helps them understand where they can focus, if they're strong in a particular area, how they can leverage that skill or that preference, and if there's a little bit of a gap there in that preference, or it's a lower preference, how they might be able to work towards that. So it gives the graduate or the early talent some real ownership in their development journey. You can use this later stages in your development program journey as well, so that they can see progress over a period of time in terms of those preferences. And you can certainly also use it post-program. So you might be looking to post-program or even late in the program support your early talent around career progression and give them some coaching in that regard. So this can be a useful data point that supports them as well. And of course, a lot of us have leadership programs or other HiPo programs, so it could also be used to identify talent for those programs as well. So a great little initiative, very simple to embed into your programs, but gives you lots of data to work from. And we often talk about we want to be making data-driven decisions on our program because we want to be able to work with what's real. And so this is a great tool to be able to use at a program strategy level to look at cohort level data as opposed to individual data. So how as a cohort, what are those things that we might need to be able to look at or adapt to for this cohort? So just as a final summary here before we get to the end, it's just a reminder from the success measures perspective that everything is aligned. So your strategy and your LVP are going to be absolutely unique to you, and the success measures that you put in place should be intentional and aligned to that LVP and those specific key development objectives. So let's wrap up before we go to questions. Remember to start with the end in mind. That is the best way to ensure that you're getting the outcomes that you're looking for. You should have a clear understanding of your learning value proposition. What is that nirvana you're trying to achieve? What's that purpose? What are those key objectives? How does it align with your wider strategy, your employee value proposition? And ultimately, what's that promise that you are selling to your candidates to attract them to your organisation in the first place? Spend time understanding what success looks like. It can be a difficult question to answer, so it's worth spending some time and having some space to do that. Ensure you've got all of your key stakeholders involved in that conversation wherever relevant, because that is obviously going to help your buy-in, and it will also help you connect to what the business values. This then is going to help you identify the competencies you need to focus on, the activities and the touch points that are going to support those competencies, and ultimately help frame the specific structure of your development program and how that might come to life. It's allowing you to build out your development journey. The examples we showed you of those visuals that really sell the program at various stages of your program, of your journey. You can socialize it with the leaders. You can socialize it with the early talent, and of course, as we said before, you're going to use that even back at that attraction stage to attract those best quality candidates. And then finally, for each of your key development objectives, start to focus in on how you're going to measure success. Understand what your key holders really want to see, and then take a considered and intentional approach. So it gives you a little bit of a journey map to create your own journey map today, which we hope is you've found really useful. Lots of elements in there that we can unpack. It's going to be very unique to you. So if you want a phone call on that, we're more than happy. We love chatting about it. But we hope there's been a few takeaways that you've taken from today. But let's start to wrap up and actually allow you the chance to ask some of those questions. Back over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Kath. Thanks, Jan. So I think we'll leave it there. We've got 5 minutes. Open up to questions, in if anyone's got any. And as you know, as we've said, please do get in touch. Please continue the conversation. We're more than happy to speak about your individual pain points or just brainstorm. So yeah, over to you, Jazz. Have we got any questions in there?
Yeah, so we had multiple people ask if we could share the slides for one. I think a lot of people found some value in what you guys were saying. But other than that, we had one specific question, which I don't know if there's a quick one that maybe Kathy or John could answer. But we had a question that was, is there anything that you would say is a must-have on a development journey?
That is a great question. John, do you want to kick off with that, and I'll add anything I can think of as well?
No, I was going to jump on the back end of your information, Kathy.
I can kick off. Look, I think must-haves is going to be unique to you, and that's coming back to that nirvana. So if you're building leadership competencies, and that's a pathway for your early talent, then that's how you think about your must-haves. So you might look at some executive leadership or some mentoring that happens at more of that senior level. You're definitely going to think about post-program leadership programs or hypo programs that allow them to move from early talent into that space. So how do you start to build some of those foundations? How do you start to speak some of that language within your program to that end? That's an example of leadership. I think from must-haves, I mean, I would say it's got to be unique to you, but must-haves for us in a lot of our client interactions, a lot of our client needs, is this idea of career support. A graduate and early talent come in, some of them with a predefined idea of where their career is going to take them, and then they might participate in some rotation opportunities and suddenly change their mind. So what I think a graduate program and an early talent program can really add value for early talent is understanding the breadth of career opportunities and supporting them to make sure that they know how to access those and that there's no one linear pathway for their career. So if you've got career support, career development thinking, and helping the graduate take ownership of that, I think that for me is a must-have in a lot of the programs that we see.
And I think just the other components of it is to really actually be proactive in your planning for these developments journey. There's the worst thing you can do is be reactive. So if you've actually got a plan in place, yes, you can remain agile and flexible to what that looks like throughout that year and respond to any changes that are required. But if you are not proactive in your planning, it's really going to catch you out at the other end. So all of the different components that make that up and all the different support networks that go with that, as long as there's a plan in place for that and everyone is on that same page, it means we've got everyone heading in the same direction.
And I think I'll add to that as well, just because I've just thought of it. I mentioned before how critical the leaders are to the experience, not only of the graduates, but of the program itself. So if you've got a leader of any early talent, whatever that program looks like, your leaders need to be on the journey. And that's not just what we've been talking about today in terms of understanding success measures and what we're looking to achieve out of the program. So a lot of the programs that we work with and a lot of the clients we work with, we're advocating for how are we supporting the leaders. So what touch points, whether it's pre-start of the program and the cohort actually arriving in your business, how can you support the leaders to know what's expected of them, to give them hints and tips around working with Gen Z, my gosh, or what that happens to be. How are you supporting the leaders? And that's often very easy to forget about. And whilst the program is going on, they're the ones on the ground. So what support do they need to support your early talent? So that's another really key measure to think about as a must-have from my perspective.
Yeah, I like to frame it up as support those that support the program. So putting everything in place to make sure that it's a consistent experience across the board.
In our previous webinar last week, we talked about developing a sort of learning and development ecosystem, and everyone that pulls into that to create that cohesive, joined up approach so that you get that engagement and you get that buy-in. And I think if anyone wants to go back and have a look at that webinar, that kind of talks about all of the different parties at play and stakeholders that you engage with to create that that development ecosystem, which can be so powerful in making sure you've got a successful program. So great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We'll leave it there for today. But yeah, please do keep in touch. Great to have you, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.